the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe's Tribal Council to pass one of the strongest smoke-free air policies in Indian country. She also had the opportunity to testify to the U.S. Congress on the youth e-cigarette epidemic and Juul's attempts to target Native people. Welcome, Ray, and welcome to our other panelists, and I will pass it over to you guys.
Thank you, Hillary. And yeah, so I'll be moderating this session here. And I think that I'm so excited that this is on the agenda. This is something that is really important for not only folks that are joining from tribal communities, but anyone throughout the state to know about kind of the history and the traditions and the complexities, I guess, when it comes to tobacco in the state of South Dakota, because we do have a high portion of Native American people. So I will be joined today. I'll start with just a really quick overview and setting the stage of kind of what the Chinchasha is, and then we'll hear from Jerrilyn, Rousseau, and Eric Jens from Sisseton, Wahpeton, Oyate, as well as Marla Bulber from the Lakota Youth Development, and myself as just examples of what we're doing in our communities to promote the use of Chinchasha. So to kick us off here, what is Chinchasha? First of all, Chinchasha is a traditional tobacco of the Lakota and Dakota people. And it's a little bit of a tricky pronunciation for people that aren't familiar. But basically the C and the S, if you just imagine that there's an extra H there, so it should be like a CH. The N is kind of nasally, so cha. And then the S is a SH sound, so Chanchasha, Chanchasha is how you pronounce that. So you can practice in your own offices here if you'd like. But essentially, Chinchasha is made from shavings of a red willow plant that is kind of scarce and a little bit difficult to find in some parts of the state and very plentiful in other parts of the state. But it's this bright red, kind of just a branch that grows around areas where there's flowing water, such as rivers. And the traditional use of Chinchasha or traditional tobacco is offerings. It can be used in prayer, either just prayed with like in the palm of your hand or smoked. And it can also be used as a gift or for medicine. It actually has properties similar to aspirin and can be used for pain relief. And it's also used in cultural ceremonies. Sometimes it can be used in a pipe. Like I said, it can be smoked, but the really important thing about the use of Chinchasha is that it's not intended to be inhaled. The smoke is just there to carry our prayers to the spirit world. And this is really, savoring that smoke in the mouth and exhaling it and not inhaling it is what makes Chinchasha sacred. So there's distinct differences between Chinchasha and commercial tobacco, which is the next slide here. And I also mentioned that, Chinchasha isn't tobacco at all. It's kind of interesting that it's called traditional tobacco. There are some tribes in different parts of the United States that actually do use the tobacco plant with the big green leaves that you think of in like tobacco fields. But that is not the case for any of the tribes in South Dakota. So I think that's maybe where that name originates from, is because some tribes do use a tobacco, or it could also be because it's a plant that's smoked, and that's similar to tobacco, but it's not actually tobacco at all. We just call it traditional tobacco, kind of a more modern name, I guess, that was passed through the colonization process. So here you can see a side-by-side picture of commercial tobacco as well as traditional tobacco. And see that, on the left-hand side of the image there, it's dark, it's stained, it's full of tar and chemicals. On the right, it's just basically shavings of that inner bark of the red willow plant. As I said before, it's not intended to be inhaled. Traditional tobacco is considered sacred, whereas commercial tobacco is not. It's not easy to get. There's a very limited window in the year that you can actually harvest Chinchasha. It's only about 2 to 3 months, depending on the year and when the thunders come and go. And it can be scarce. We did an event here recently, and we really had to try hard to find a location that had enough Chinchasha to harvest. Commercial tobacco is more convenient. I mean, yes, it's easy to just go to the store and buy a pack of beech nut or whatever, a pack of Marlboros, and use that for traditional purposes, but that's not the true tradition. Traditional tobacco is humble and not flashy, whereas commercial tobacco is fast, rushed, and flashy. We know just with all the marketing that goes into it, the colors, the flavors, all of that is not traditional. It's commercialized. And then the other very big importance between the two is commercial tobacco is addictive because of nicotine and other chemicals that are added to it. Whereas traditional tobacco is not addictive and has no potential for abuse. Commercial tobacco is unnatural. Of course, it originates from the tobacco plant, but after the tobacco companies add all the chemicals and things, it's highly processed and leaves its original natural state, which is not the case for traditional tobacco. There's no additives in that. Commercial tobacco, as we all know, is very harmful to a person's health in many different ways. I think it affects every organ of the body versus traditional tobacco, which has no additives and is safe. I mean, it's just a plant that is burned. And then finally, commercial tobacco generally is used for pleasure and kind of that dopamine release, but traditional tobacco is used with thought and is intended to be used with respect as well. So some very important differences between commercial and traditional tobacco that's important to know if you're working with anyone in South Dakota, because chances are, that you'll cross paths with somebody who may be native and have kind of some different viewpoints of when you say tobacco, what that means, if that's commercial or traditional. So I guess there's, like I said, to start with, there's a lot of intricacies and complexities behind the history of tobacco in Native populations, and many of these have resulted in increased rates of tobacco use. I know on Cheyenne River here, our most recent data showed that 51% of our population is smoking. And we know with vaping here introduced in more recent years that number is potentially changed or increased even more. So kind of when I think about what's contributed to these higher rates of tobacco use in our Native populations in South Dakota, you can see colonization is one. I think through the process of colonization, tobacco seeds were exported by European settlers. They were enhanced, they were commercialized, popularized among all races, not just Native or Caucasian races. And American Indians have been stripped of traditions throughout history. This includes the use of sacred plants like Chinchasha. This led to American Indians using commercial tobacco in a traditional way because they were not legally able to use this plant for quite some time. Then federal extermination and assimilation policies definitely contribute to that. And what happens is, back in 1978, that's really not that long ago. Until that point, Native people were not able to use that traditional plant. But after that happened, it was able to be used, but a lot of the tradition had been lost for several years at that point. So it's kind of this process now of reclaiming that tradition and not just, educating, but talking about the importance and the distinct differences between the two plants. And then as far as marketing goes, the marketing of native imagery and names resulted in kind of this blurred distinction between traditional and commercial tobacco. You can see the natural American spirits and the smoking joes on the screen here. Both of these have a native looking cartoon in a headdress. The natural American spirit also has a picture of the sacred pipe being used. Some of these companies talk about their product being natural, organic, non-addictive, and unfortunately, some people believe that these are manufactured by native tribes or people, and that they're safer or can be used in place of traditional tobacco. But the truth is that they have just as many harmful substances, chemicals, addictive properties as a pack of Marlboro Reds. So this is something that we work hard to talk about in our own community, and it's important to acknowledge that throughout the state as well. And then also when you think about marketing, it's not only just the packaging and the imagery and the names, but just this kind of targeted exploitation that happens. It's not so current now, but in the past, there's been like booths at powwows and rodeos with free tobacco products that maybe was a person's first exposure to commercial tobacco, and then resulted in addiction. And then the picture that just came up now is something that has happened both right here on Cheyenne River, as well as throughout other tribes in the nation. Juul, the leading e-cigarette company in 2019, came to the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. They sent 3 representatives, and they pitched a switching program to our tribal health program. What they wanted to do was have a referral system. So for any adult smokers, they were going to have healthcare providers pair them up with Juul, and then they would get free product from Juul to switch from combustible tobacco, which is smoking, to vaping. Obviously, this was very problematic. They broke a lot of federal rules in this process, and as a result, I was invited to testify about that experience to the United States Congress. And there's been a lot of progress since then, with Juul being exposed as targeting, I believe, 8 tribes throughout South Dakota with the same, throughout the nation with the same pitch. And I think these are the efforts that often don't get exposed because it's easy to go to a sovereign tribal nation and feel like they're kind of off the grid and don't have to follow the rules. So it's really important to prevent that from happening in tribal communities. And if it does, speak out about it. So that's just kind of a variety of the tobacco marketing that tribal communities deal with that also contribute to increased rates of tobacco use. Next is poverty. This one's sensitive, of course, but we just know it's a fact that people of low socioeconomic status have higher rates of tobacco use, and that's kind of a loaded idea with a lot of things that contribute to it as well. We could probably dissect that much deeper, but it's possible that it's related to increased stress that comes with just being a lower income family, familiar patterns that if your parents were tobacco users, the chances that you're going to be a tobacco user is much higher too. And just exposure that if you're living in an environment that's surrounded by other people living in poverty and using tobacco, the chances that will pass on is higher. And then I think there's this huge issue again of targeting with poverty communities. We know that there are efforts by the tobacco industry to try to get those lower income populations to use tobacco, whether that's product placement near schools like the slide shows, or near lower income areas, or just kind of these inherent beliefs of the tobacco industry. You can see here on the screen, this is a very well-known quote from the tobacco industry in 1971 by R.J. Reynolds, executive, that said, "We don't smoke that bleep, we just sell it. We reserve the right to smoke for the young, the poor, the Black, and the stupid." So it's incredibly offensive, this statement, but this just gets to the core of what the tobacco industry believes in, that they're targeting minorities, they're targeting lower income, young people, and people with less education. So that is a direct result now that those populations have higher rates of tobacco use. And then social norms, of course, I talked a little bit about parents that smoke, leading to kids that smoke, but also if you think about just kind of friend groups, if you're exposed to smoking or vaping, or your best friends are smoking or vaping, that's definitely going to have an impact. So just the exposure to that makes it feel okay or normal, or like everybody's doing it, definitely increases the use in tribal communities. And then finally, multi-generational trauma is definitely worth noting that this is another super loaded one, but everything from cultural genocide and attempts of erasure of the population, boarding school histories, adverse childhood experiences. There's generation after generation of trauma. And maybe if you weren't somebody that was directly affected by any of these things, your relatives were, and that's something that is passed on. We know that there's down to genetic level changes that happen from multi-generational trauma that could contribute to increased use of substances in general. So this is just kind of a big picture of all of the factors that are playing into potential increased rates of use of tobacco in Native populations. So with that, that's kind of just setting the stage. I'm going to transition to Jerrilyn, Rousseau, and Eric Jins, who are going to share from the Sisseton, Wahpeton, and Oyate. And I'll go ahead and just let them introduce themselves for sake of time, if there's anything they want to start off with. Go ahead and take it away, Erica and Jerrilyn.
Thanks, Ray. This is Jerrilyn Rousseau. I work at the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate Tribal Education Department, and I work with Eric Jens. Can we go to the next slide, please? We got the Disparities Grant, and we are working on revitalizing Chanchasha for our tribe. And I will let Eric start with the next slide.
The uses for a long time, since I was a little boy, I can remember we used commercial tobacco in our ceremonies. Just recently, within the past 6 or 7 years, we've been instructed to go get and harvest Chanchasha. Ceremonially, the smell is recognizable by our ancestors, and they know that time was put in to go getting this Chanchasha, harvesting it, and able to get it medically. My mom told me a story of how when babies were teething and they're getting popping teeth out, they'd go get the branches and the tips and they'd boil this up, and then they'd give it to their babies just for a fever reducer, a pain reliever. That's how they used it, and how it still can be used. Socially, we give it out. We have a word for opari, to fill or to give an offering. And it's easy to go out, like she said, it's easy to go out just to go buy a piece of tobacco and throw it at something, ask for something. You know, in our culture, it's a reciprocity thing. We're always giving and giving back and helping each other. It's not a take. It's a give and give back kind of thing. So with this Chanchasha, we know people took their time, went out in the coldest months of the year, and went out and harvested this. Had to walk in the deep ditches near lakes, searching for this. So that's what we use it for, and we're still learning the origins and the history of Chanchasha. I found out there's 5 or 6 origin stories. 5 or 6 origin stories, from a boy being lost to a coming from the stars, a big fire on the plains. Ojibways talk about the Spider Woman bringing it. So different families have different origin stories of this Chinchasha. And however you believe, however you're told the story, that's yours. That belongs to you. Next slide, please. Harvesting Chanchasha. This took a little bit. You have to go find the nearest slough, the nearest lake, the nearest creek or creek. I say creek. And you have to look for the redness when you're driving along, and they say it looks like fire. It looks like fire next to the road. If you see it, and then that's it. A long time ago, they wouldn't cut it. They wouldn't cut it and take it home. They used it for young men. Young men, a long time ago, they were hurting each other, and they'd go set them out, and they'd show them how to shave off the red bark and get what they call the meat underneath this red bark, and they'd shave it off. They'd put a little blanket underneath, and as they shave it, they would collect this Chanchasha. And at this time and at this moment, they're focusing on this. They're focusing on what's from the Mother Earth, lessons being taught, and that's how they would harvest it a long time ago. Now we drive around, we see where it's at, and we cut it and take it home. It's good. I know some kushi, some grandmas who use it to shave it. They like to shave it, and they like to rub it on their hands for the arthritis, and it helps them in that way. The red bark and also the shavings from underneath. And I just found out they make cool dream catchers. And that's harvesting. It takes a little time. You got to find good roads to drive on. You might need a pickup if you go in the ditch. You're gonna have to have somebody pull you out, so you gotta let people know where you're going, where you're gonna pick this, and you gotta be safe sometimes when harvesting Chanchasha, because it's from December to the first thunders. You got that little time and window in there to pick it. And so that's the uses and the harvesting that I was taught through elders, uncles, aunties, from here. Next slide.
All right. Thanks, Eric. So yeah, like Eric mentioned, we can only harvest it during certain times. And there's only certain locations where it's available. So we don't necessarily have gardens of it. There are certain areas where it grows. And those are kind of, those that are more traditional in a sense, know where these different areas are. We do have some that is actually really close to our school and our building, and you can see it as you drive by. So that's probably like the only easy access area to go and harvest. But our Chanchasha, it's sacred. It can't be duplicated or replicated. What we have is what we have, and so we need to protect it make sure there's no unintentional demolition of a natural field or garden that we have. So with this project and revitalizing it, it's, we're protecting what we have and also making sure we pass down that knowledge and information to our youth and to everyone else. So within our project, we have, we're reaching out to just all the different groups that we possibly can think of. And we go to the different community groups to try to share this information, doing workshops for the tribal education department, so that our team can learn how to do the harvest and share this information, and we can add it to our cultural activities list, which we are able to provide to some of the surrounding public schools. So our team will go into the schools and we can teach lessons on different things. You mentioned about the cool dream catchers. That was one of a recent cultural activity that our tribal education department did. Our team went out and picked out some red willow. They cut it, they soaked it, and we bent them and made hoops so that they can go into one of our public schools, and they taught them about dream catchers. We will be doing workshops. Our team will learn about the Chanchasha, be able to do presentations for the schools. So we're doing workshops for just different areas and groups. We're also going to do workshops out at one of our tribal schools. In the tribal schools, we do have educators that do provide the curriculum and teach about Chanchasha and the differences between it. But depending on the kid and the age, depending on what classes they have, if they happen to not have that instructor during that time, after school, this is another opportunity for them to still get that information, as well as we're still doing these workshops to continue on, so that even after this grant is over, it's something that's still in place and still continuing to grow and network out. We also are doing tabling at just different events, traditional and non-traditional events. So when we have community events, like with booths and tables, the standard tobacco cessations booths, we also have that information provided as well. And then also with our traditional things like a ceremony, like the Buffalo Run, ceremonial Sundance, things like that, having those pamphlets and information to provide for people that, the proper protocol for Chanchasha, and then as well as, providing that information for the quit line, because, some people, it's been a lot of years that they use the commercial tobacco for ceremonial reasons. And now they've been using, the tobacco products for so many years, and to shift away from that and go back to the traditional Chanchasha and not use the commercial products anymore. And then just advertising everywhere and anywhere we can think of, our local newspaper, social media posts, like established accounts that have these different groups with them, trying to reach the different areas to post and to share the information with them. On the side there, you can kind of see, those are just some examples of things that we've done. Newspaper ads, what we're sharing, like those little business cards to hand those out at like the traditional events, where you can't really set out a table at a Buffalo Run. Everyone's out in the open field. It's just as you pass by, just handing out little business cards or pamphlets, something people can put in their pockets. And then the social media posts there. And then, so that's what we've been working on and going through and doing that. Back to you, Ray.
Yeah, thank you, Erica, or I'm sorry, Eric and Jerrilyn, for that great information. It's so great to see all the work that's happening on a variety of locations throughout South Dakota. Now we're going to pivot to Marla Bulber from the Lakota Youth Development to hear about some of the Chinchasha activities she has going on in their area. Take it away, Marla.
Midakipi, Dayaya he.
No.
Daya Wachia Kape. Chante Wastea Nape Chusa Pixto.
Hey. No.
I'm glad to be here. I'm glad that you're here. Can you see me? I don't even know.
Yes, we can, Marla.
Okay. Oh dear. I'm glad to be here, and I greet you with a good heart and a handshake. I wanted to, I'm glad I was last. So these young people had some wonderful things to share with you, Ray, and also our relatives from Sisseton. And I'm Marla Bulber. I'm from the Milks Camp community in the Rosebud Reservation. And I've been running Lakota Youth Development for this last 30 years. This is our 30th anniversary. And we've been doing tobacco prevention kind of off and on. We did it a number of years ago, and then we got back into it. And we're really glad that because it's an ongoing issue with our young people. Commercial tobacco, you've heard all about it. That's why we're here. I just want to share with you a little bit. Ray, can you like keep me informed? I can talk all day, so you got to let me know when to quit.
Sure.
All right. So we're here. Our organization is all about reclaiming our culture, reclaiming our young people's foundation of who they are, their self-identity. And a part of that is also respect and balance. Balance, it's really hard to put commercial tobacco in your life and expect to have balance. It's like one of those chemicals that just wants more and more. And I can tell you personally from my life that, you know, I've lived a lot of the things that Ray talked about. My family, all the history that she shared. You know, my grandpa went to Carlisle Indian School and he came back and he was a smoker. He rolled his own. He got the loose leaf tobacco, but it was traded for things. And then my parents were World War II veterans, and it was a government issue. They were given cigarettes. They learned how to smoke while they were fighting the war. And so when they came home, that was part of their life. I remember as a little girl sitting at the kitchen table when they would all be smoking and having wakalabi coffee, and they would have visitors. And I would have to put my head down on the table below the smoke cloud. And so needless to say, I didn't learn my lesson, because when I went to school, there was peer pressure. So we would sneak the cigarette butts from my folks' ashtrays, and my friends did the same one. Now we had a break, we'd sneak into, of all things, an old shed. We could have burnt it down, but you know, that's the history. And you know, I didn't realize how detrimental it was until I was married and I was pregnant with my first child. And then I learned that it was not good for the baby. You know, and that's kind of how we are. So a lot of us Native people, we, you know, we'll do something for someone else first. If it's for someone else, it's important, more important sometimes than us. And that's not always a good thing. But, you know, the reason I quit when I was 25 was for my children. And, you know, the thing is as an ex-smoker, I'll tell you right now, is that you have stressful situations and you still have a little tinge of craving. It never goes away. And so that's to be able to share with our youth a multicultural, multi-generational perspective, because we have elders that come and share with our youth, and we incorporate tobacco prevention in everything we do. We have camps, summer camps throughout the year, 4-day summer camps. We do weekend retreats throughout the school year. We have leadership societies, youth-led social enterprises, and you know, we do things after school. We have apprenticeships with our those youth that are local. We're located in the eastern end of the Rosebud Reservation, actually in Gregory County, which is not recognized as part of the tribe proper reservation, but we're on tribal lands, and where Milks Camp was the first community established. But you know, that's some of the history that was talked about. This hit real people like me, like many people in our communities. And so it's really a challenge for us to break that cycle. Our efforts are really involving, like I said, multi-generational. We focus on decolonizing our youth. Decolonizing our youth is a gradual step. Understanding who you are and being proud of who you are is an important part of being able to have the confidence to say no to things and say yes to good things. And so we focus on our youth strengths. And so we have them experience harvesting Chanchasha, harvesting our medicinal and herbal plants, and doing it in a good way. But the challenge is that we offer tobacco when we make those, when we harvest. And so to offer commercial tobacco is hurting grandmother earth, because a big part of being a cultural person and understanding your role in the universe and with grandmother earth is to tread lightly on her. And if we're putting chemicals back into her, we're hurting her. We're doing what we didn't want to do to our youth. We're doing that to grandmother earth. And so to have natural Chanchasha, to have natural plants to use for those offerings are really important. And those are the things that we want to stress. In fact, this spring, we're going to be planting Chanchasha because we're worried that there's going to be over harvesting. You know, when we educate people about Chanchasha, there's a lot of our people, over 20%. Ray, you can break in and correct me, but I think it's like 20% of the population are Native in South Dakota, something like that. And so to have people, ask people to go back to those traditional ways, we also know that our natural resources are limited. And so what we plan to do is to grow and leave our Chanchasha that's out in the wild, leave it to grow and leave those plant families to really develop and then have that growing here for our use, for our needs, for prayer, for tobacco use in our chanupas, our pipes. Those are the things that, so that we can allow the plant nation to get grain strength because of overgrazing, because of farming practices. A lot of our Chanchasha is at risk, much like we have been. So we're working with those things and trying to help our youth have a better worldview of what balance is all about. Those environmental stewardship issues are really part and parcel of tobacco prevention. And you wouldn't initially think that, but culturally, to have a healthy relationship with plant nation, and we're talking about Chanchasha, our red willow bark that we have, that we use, we have to make sure that we don't harvest it into extinction. And that's something that has many of our other medicinal and edible plants are at risk. And so what we're trying to do here is create a natural food and medicinal forest where we can have and grow these things and leave what is in the natural environment to gain strength. And so at some point in time, when we have that balance returned, then we can harvest, in different places. But for now, we're intending to identify, and we have plant experts that are coming to help us. Ethnobotanists will be here to help us with that process. And so that's a big thing about the plant. The other thing that we're doing is we're taking our youth and having our youth be immersed as much as possible in our cultural events, our cultural activities, where ceremonies are held. We just had one welcoming the thunder, which is an important recognition both for Chanchasha. That's the end of the Chanchasha harvest. In fact, we had a thunder snow here in Milks Camp, and that was, now that the thunders are back, we can't harvest. So we go and we took our youth to Black Elk Peak, where they use the tobacco, the Chanchasha in the ceremony with the chanupa, and they made their prayer walk up to the top of Black Elk Peak. Those kinds of experiences for our youth solidify their teachings and their understandings, and it helps to ground them and be more confident in knowing how these things are used, what are the cultural ways that we embrace this, and have a degree of respect, because they're elders. Sorry, our office cat likes to be in the spotlight. So I just wanted to share that, we utilize, we serve youth primarily on the Rosebud, but we have youth that participate from all around the state, and we encourage youth to take an application. What we do is free for our youth. Nothing is of cost. One of the things that we did for the pandemic specifically, and I don't know, I can't see here, but we made these good medicine bags. On the Rosebud, we had cultural and spiritual guides that told us that in order to make our prayers, to be conscious of and respectful and what deal with the pandemic. A lot of us, I think, refound our faith during the pandemic. It was definitely scary times, and many of us has lost many relatives. So we have these spiritual ways that help guide us and give us a little sense of comfort. But the spiritual leaders came together and told us that we needed to make tobacco ties. Those are for prayer. We also use them for prayers. And so to make a certain color of tobacco ties, to smudge with sage and cedar, we use smoke for a lot of our prayers, to carry a lot of our prayers upward to the Creator. And so these kinds of things, tobacco, smoke, plants that we use, a lot of people see see that we're having a ceremony and there's smoke, and they automatically think it's tobacco. But I think Ray and the group from Sisseton, I apologize, I don't remember your names, but to understand our perspective when we say tobacco, we're talking about our traditional plants. And so these are the understandings that we try to share with our youth, and we work with youth 12 to 18. And so, a lot of people are saying, oh man, that's a tough group to work with. Well, that's the perfect group to work with, because if you can get them involved in these kinds of things, they're less likely to try it. And they're more likely to quit. Because the reality, a lot of our 12-year-olds have already tried smoking. They've already tried it. They've already experimented. Some of them may already be regular smokers. And so we have to help guide them and also deal and address the addiction part, because commercial tobacco is addictive. Believe me, don't I know? It took me 7 times to quit. So, I can share that with the youth, my personal experience. Elders can too. So I just wanted to, share these things. The growing part of of understanding the depth of cultural, we're talking deep culture here. I think that we had a presentation earlier on cultural awareness. When we're talking about the use of Chanchasha, we're talking about those things that are deep culture. It's not surface culture. It's not something that is done offhandedly or easily. It's something that must be done with education, with awareness, with support, and with guidance. Many of our cultural ways, we don't engage in things unless we're invited. We don't do things unless we're invited. So this is one of the things that we've tried to create here, is a safe environment where we have elders and people that are knowledgeable and experienced, those that have been sun dancers, those that pour the water at the Anipi, the sweat lodge, those people who have gone through what it takes to be teachers, to be those knowledgeable people, and we invite them in to share. It's not something that those of us here, myself or staff, we're a humble people. We don't go around saying I'm an expert. I'm not an expert in anything. I've got a master's degree in community counseling. Before that, I said I was a jack of all trades, a master of none. Well, I'm master of one thing, I'm master of community counseling. So, the one thing that I think we can do for our youth, and what we're trying to do, is use all of the ways that youth communicate. And that's one of the things that I think all of us need to work at, is being able to reach them through social media, because that's where they're at when they're not with us. They're on social media, whether it's TikTok or, I'm sorry, but I'm of the generation where I don't know a lot of that stuff. I have to rely on my youth to tell me. And, they're the best experts on what they do. So, we have this perspective here that nothing about us without us. And so our youth have to be the ones directing and driving the messages, because they know what gets to people. They know what makes a difference. And a lot of it is support and caring, and someone to share, and having, knowing that you have someone at your back that they can trust. A lot of those things are something that all of us need. And we assume that because, they have families, that they have all this. But we have a lot of things that we're struggling from because of colonization yet today. One of the things that we used this last year is we had a number of youth from our reservation participate in a very important thing. They brought 9 of our 9 bodies home to the Rosebud Reservation that were buried at Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania. And that was, tobacco was used in prayers. Tobacco was used, smoke was used in cleansing, and helping the families to heal and laying them back to rest. History is not something that is just in books. Our youth came to recognize those things. So, we're here to support them and help them. And I hope that some of the things I had to say is helpful. And, you know where to find me if you have any questions. LakotaYouthDevelopment.org. I'm Ed at LakotaYouthDevelopment.org. That's my email. So thank you for listening, and thank you, Ray, and everyone that asked me to participate in this panel. Thanks.
So much wisdom and great ideas shared. Marla, thank you for sharing all the great work that's happening with Lakota Youth Development. I'm going to share a little bit about what the Chunli Coalition has been doing on Cheyenne River to revitalize Chinchasha in our tribal community. On the screen, you can see somebody who's very near and dear to my heart. The late Hazel Redbird was a longtime Chunli Coalition member. And several years ago, she came to one of our meetings and said, we got to do something about this. She said, I was at a service recently. Somebody handed me a cigarette and asked me for a prayer. It's appropriate to accept anytime you're offered tobacco. So she did, but she said, I feel like we're missing an opportunity to turn this into a teachable moment and say, yes, I'll accept the offering and say the prayer, but here's, some information about maybe a different way to approach that in the future. So what we did is made some cards with information about asking for that wapagi and the I guess making it more available, because as it's been mentioned several times, it's very scarce, it's hard to get. Not everybody knows how to do that or has the resources to. So what the Chunli Coalition did is we made these Chinchasha pods. They soon will be converted into little bags, but this is something that we've been working hard for several years to make available to our community for free. It only takes a very small amount of Chanchasha for an offering or a prayer. So we just do very small amounts that that people can get for free. And we discourage them from using the costly, not sacred, harmful, addictive commercial tobacco, as you can see in our little promotion here. So that's one of the initiatives we've done to try to revitalize the use of Chinchasha in our community. And then on the next slide, you can see similar to what Marla was talking about as far as gardening, because we have such scarce red willow on Cheyenne River. We realized that actually right behind our office is kind of a slough area that has standing water a lot of times. Currently we're in a drought, so that's not the case right now. But we took advantage of that location to plant some Chinchasha or some red willow plants. And you can see here in our sign that the purpose is to make Chinchasha or red willow more available to the CRC community. So Chanli, which is the Lakota word for commercial tobacco, is no longer used for traditional purposes. This is right in the town of Eagle Butte. We are unsure yet if the plant is happy there. It will remain there, and it will be kind of a public access once it gets large enough to harvest. If it's not thriving in this location, at least we have a good basis that can be transplanted to a more natural environment to make it more available in our community. So that's something that's been going for about 2 years now. And you can see just the growth that happened within the last year. And we're excited to see, once the moisture comes back, what our plants look like this coming spring. Another thing that we do in a lot of our media efforts is to encourage our local artists, whether they're graphic designers or painters or musicians, to talk about kind of this difference between traditional and commercialized tobacco. And you can see from a couple of the winners here, they've been used in a variety of ways: window clings, smoke-free signs, logos, t-shirts, water bottles. This one in the top right is one of our newest ones, Wichoha, tradition, not addiction, it says in fine print. And then down below, you can see the skeleton image that has some facts about tobacco, and it also has a note to keep tobacco sacred. So this is just kind of how our community has used their creativity and art to incorporate and continue the learning around the difference between commercial and traditional tobacco. We do have a video that I don't think we have time to share, but I'll put a link in the chat. A few years back, we had 2 youth make a video about traditional tobacco that is equally entertaining and funny as it is, serious and informative. So I'll drop that in the chat here shortly. Another way that we incorporate Chanchasha into a lot of our efforts is in our education with the youth, specifically in schools. Every year when we have a new group, we talk about, their shirts or their banners that we help them with. And several of them for several years have wanted not just images of, not smoking or vaping, but messages around keeping tobacco sacred on their media that they use. When we do tobacco fairs, we call it, we have little booths that kids can stop at about different topics around tobacco. One might be about secondhand smoke, the next might be about vaping, the next on marketing. And then we always, of course, have a booth on traditional tobacco that you can see here. And we have a display case that shows kind of the distinct differences between our traditional tobacco with some tobacco ties, the red willow branches and actual harvested Chinchasha next to some of the commercialized brands that are marketing and misappropriating Native people. So it's always a part of our education with the schools as well. And then in the next slide, I just want to give a shout out to the Miniwichoni Health Circle. This is a group located on Standing Rock that you can visit their website or Google them for more information, but they were kind of a leader to us. The last spring, I believe it was, they had a Chinchasha revitalization project that they did. And there was a bit different than what we ended up doing, but they took a group of elders and apprentices and young people out onto the land and located areas where Chinchasha is already growing, or maybe it's a good habitat for Chinchasha to grow. And they made walking paths to those locations. They planted Chinchasha in several different districts of the Standing Rock Reservation. And there was tons of learning that happened following that. So we heard about this great work and wanted to do something similar on Cheyenne River. They do have a Chinchasha revitalization guidebook that they are in the process of developing that's not been released yet, but if that's of interest, follow their Facebook or webpage for more information once that becomes available. It's got great activities for youth, everything from coloring pages to science experiments that all relate to the teachings of Chinchasha. So something to look forward to, but we really looked to them as leaders as we did our own Chinchasha revitalization project here just a few weeks ago on Cheyenne River, which is in the next slide. So what we did is took some of our coalition members and elders and partners and old learners, young learners, people of all ages and experiences, about an hour and 20 minutes from Eagle Butte. It was a bitterly cold day, as it's been mentioned. Chinchasha is usually only harvested in the winter months, but we made it out there. You can see kind of that bright red that's growing along the river. There was amazing, beautiful stories and teachings that were shared, as well as a variety of different techniques to shave to remove the red outer bark and peel that meat, as it's been called, underneath, and different discussions on how the sticks, the inner bark, can be used then. So it was really just a beautiful day that we had to share and learn. And our challenge for each of the participants that were there to learn was to not just take that teaching home for themselves, but to pass that on to at least one other, and to ask whoever they teach to pass that on to somebody else. So it's just kind of this exponential growth of these lessons and these stories being shared. So pretty special day for the Chunli Coalition that happened just here a few weeks ago. And so that's kind of the highlights of what the Chunli Coalition has been doing to revitalize Chanchasha, as well as some of our partners that have already presented. There are some resources here that I wanted to point out. The Find Your Power website of the states has some great information on sacred Chinchasha. If there's something that you missed or want more information on, you can see the link there. The next two bullets are really great resources that I reference and use frequently. The De Silva is about tobacco industry misappropriation of American Indian culture and traditional tobacco, and that's a great read with some really nice photos and examples of how the tobacco industry has kind of used this culture, or misappropriated the culture and the use of traditional tobacco. The next one by Lempert et al. Is the tobacco industry promotional strategies of targeting Native American and Alaska Natives and exploiting tribal sovereignty. And basically that article dug into the industry records that were released and found concrete examples of how people who are Native had been targeted and exploited. So both really, really good reads with lots of good information and quotes to pull from if you're interested in this topic. The next is, if you're interested in the Jules switching program that was offered to the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. There's a publication that's just hot off the press there. And finally, the Tribal Tobacco Advocacy Toolkit, which is housed on the Find Your Power website currently. And that's got a lot of resources, not only about Chinchasha, but just how we have worked to incorporate the cultural life waves of the Lakota into all of our tobacco initiatives. So that's kind of a wrap up, I guess, of everything that's been shared. And I just will go ahead and open it up for questions for all of our presenters. And if you do have a question specific to just one presenter, please include that in your question.
Thanks, Ray. And there is one question in the chat. I don't know if you want me to read those to you or be easier for you to read them, or
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so it looks like we have a question about if the outside bark that is shaved off, if that's used for anything, and if that can be used to make herbal tea with. Would any of our panelists like to take that question?
Yes, we do shave. Well, we do use the bark. You know, we use them. We put them in coffee filters to make little tea bags. So you can use that. That was instructed to save the bark, along with the smaller sticks on the Chanchasha. You know, you mix those smaller sticks with the bark, and you're able to use the bark and the sticks for pain relief and fever.
Thank you, Eric.
This is Marla. I just want to add that if you intend to use it as a tea, you need, like with any herbal medicines, and this is used as a medicine. So please be careful and find out and take a small amount. You know, less is more, and because there's you know, different degrees of potencies and strength, you know, depending on how you steep it and things like that. So, you know, everyone's body's individual. So we just ask you to do that with caution and, you know, be careful when using any kind of medicine, herbal medicines.
Thanks for making that point, Marla. Another question from Emily. She says, do any of the panelists know of any Chinchasha initiatives that are taking place West River or in the Black Hills area? And I'd also invite anyone who's joining as a participant, if you have a response to this or aware of anything, to jump in and share. Okay, so hearing none, I'm guessing that's most likely a no, but Emily, if you or anyone that you partner with is interested in leading some of those Chinchasha initiatives out West River in the Black Hills area, please reach out to myself or other panelists if they're comfortable with that. Or the Mini-Wachoni Health Circles Guide book would be another good resource if you're interested in taking on some of those initiatives. And then another question, can you tell a little bit about your cultural quick kits, what is in them and how they're used? Where can we get more information?
This is Marla. I think they're referring to the kits that we gave out. We really followed our cultural advisors and spiritual leaders to put together kits. And this was really specific for, you know, the pandemic. So we included things like sage and cedar. We put in fabric of the colors that that we were instructed, and sinew. So all the materials that they need to make tobacco ties, and we even put in a tuki, a shell. So that they could smudge their home and purify their homes with the sage and the cedar. So, and then we put in a little, just contact us if you have questions, because we're humble. We're not going to assume that we know everything. So we just put our contact information in there, and people, sometimes they reached out through Facebook. They reached out through calls. The ones that are kind of really colonized, many of our families are. And so we just put our contact information, and we were really pleasantly surprised how many called us and said, okay, how do I do the ties? How do I do this? And so we explained that to them in a private way that wasn't public, or we didn't want to put them in a place of feeling, well, gee, I didn't know this, they had to give me instructions kind of perspective. So yeah, if you want to give me a call, we could talk about that, but that was really specific for the Rosebud people. I really encourage you to go back to your cultural and spiritual leaders in your area and consult with them before you put these things together.
Great question, and thanks for giving that additional information, Marla. Any other questions?
I got one, Ray, that was sent to me. Are there any tips? It sounds like everyone has been pretty successful in working with youth in their communities. Any big initial tips that you could think of off the top of your head to share?
With youth specifically, I think, I guess from my perspective, it's so important to have these conversations with them and talk about, that this is not anything to be shameful if they've never done this before or learned this before, to approach it with humility and be open-minded to learn from their elders. And kind of like Marla said here just now, that if they're unsure of anything or have questions, to just ask them, that it's okay to reach out and say, I've never done this before. Can somebody help me or talk me through this? And I think anytime that a youth or any age is willing to do that, they will be met with open arms and embraced for asking and being willing to learn and kind of be vulnerable a bit. Marla, Jerrilyn, Eric, anything else you wanted to add about working with youth when it comes to revitalizing Chinchasha?
Ray, I'd just like to add that the majority of the calls that we got were from adults. We connected with all the youth that we have involved in our program and anyone interested. And a lot of times it was the adults that didn't know. And the youth weren't comfortable in telling their families, oh, I've done this. I've gone through this, had these experiences in our program. And so it was really a really good way to connect with adults. We could talk with them in a respectful way. And it's easier to do that on the phone or Facebook. You can ask a lot of questions. That's kind of what happens in those using those tools. So, with youth, it's the experience. It's the experience, the hands-on experience, the experiential learning that takes place that matters. And with adults, I see that it's really the youth that kind of get the adults involved. And so, and help make them feel comfortable that we are really safe people to talk to. So, that's just one of the things I wanted to add to that.
Great, thank you, Marla. Well, with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up with a few just final resources to share. There is if this session interested you, there's a National Tribal Tobacco Conference coming up that I serve on the steering committee for, and our theme it's our first ever conference is Reclaiming and Restoring Traditional Tobacco in Today's World, and that's coming up in May. There's both an in-person conference in Minneapolis, and there's also a virtual option to join. So I'll put the link in the chat there if you're interested in learning more about that. I also linked the Facebook video of some of our youth who made a video about Chinchasha. And And I think the other thing is if this is something that you would like to maybe venture into, the Chunli initiative to empower South Dakota tribes, which Missouri Breaks has been doing for about 2 years now, will have some $5,000 mini grant opportunities coming up later this fall. So maybe if you haven't been funded by a state grant before and just kind of want to get your feet wet with something like, a Chinchasha revitalization initiative in your own community, that would be an amazing fit for the mini grants. So stay tuned for that. If you'd like information, you can reach out to me directly, or any of the state partners can connect you to that information as well once it's released later this fall. I just want to say thank you so much to each of our presenters for sharing what they're doing in their communities to revitalize the use of traditional tobacco. And thank everyone who had questions and for your attention for the last hour.
Thank you, Ray, and thank you, Marla and Jerrilyn and Eric. We are going to take a quick break. We'll have you come back at 11:10 a.m. Central Time, 10:10 Mountain Time, for our next session. And so go ahead and grab a quick snack, stretch a little bit, and then we will be back.